Labas vakaras. Aš nežinau, ar jūs mane girdite, tikiuosi, kad taip. Esu Rita Miliūtė, Lietuvos radijo ir televizijos žurnalistė, o taip pat Šaulių sąjungos narė, kuo šiandieną ypatingai didžiuojuosi. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Rita Miliūtė. I am journalist of Lithuanian Public Television and Radio, and as well member of Lithuania's Rifleman Union. And it's genuine honor to be a part of our family today, and a great pleasure to announce that we start our panel discussion. And the topic is how to confront the threats. Panelists of this discussion, as you may see, are Mr. Amir Maimon, ambassador of Israel to Lithuania, Mäki-Reinikka Harri, ambassador of Finland to Lithuania, Jouni Voutilainen, Finland's defense attaché, Mr. Artūras Paulauskas, chairman of National Security and Defense Committee, Marius Kasniūnas, chairman of the Lithuanian Foundation Board, US, and Colonel Jakob Sokard Larsen, commander of NATO Force Integration Unit. So, if you don't mind, our panelists will have up to a couple of minutes to make their statements of main issue of that topic, how to confront the threats, and later we will start discussion. Okay? So, Mr. Maimon, would you start, please? What would you point out as the main threats for this region?
For this region? Okay. Well, I'm not going to talk about, this region. I'm going to talk about how I believe, a country should protect and defend itself. I will not talk about the region because I don't feel that I'm, I know a lot about this region. I'm a newcomer to Lithuania. It's a never-ending learning process, and I am not sure that I feel on a safe ground to, share my views about this region. But as a former military officer who served in the Israeli army for many years, over 12 years, in paratroopers, special forces. I fought in the 1982 war, 1978 Lebanon war, and many other military operations. I can tell you that, this morning we heard a message from, President Grybauskaitė. So she was talking about two major points in her, greetings. She was talking about military power, and she was talking about the human resources. And I believe that this is pretty much what a nation is in need for. A nation is in need for, the people to understand that there is nobody else who will be the job for them. And it's, a way of living. My father was a general in the army. I was a colonel in the Israeli army. And unfortunately, my two boys are currently doing their military service. And for none of us, at any point, there were any questions about whether we should, serve our country. I believe that it's very important to make sure that, youngsters, in schools, high schools, and every other citizen, whether in the reserve or in, other function, will understand that from time to time, we have to give back to our country. And we have to, educate our children and our young generation that we should, contribute something. And it's not very easy because, there is a risk, especially in my part of the world, when we send our children to, the army, and I have currently two boys in combat units, we always, afraid that one day we'll get, and we'll receive a bad and sad message. And we know it, and still we are willing to do it. The other thing is, of course, the military power. The military power is helps a country, a nation to defend itself. A will is important. A will is also an understanding. Is important to understand that you simply don't have any other choice. You know, it's not that we had, an option to choose our neighbors in the Middle East. We were born to a reality where we are surrounded with quite a number of unfriendly countries. And right from day number one, from the day of independence, we were forced to defend ourselves. So once again, it's the human resources that, understood that we need to invest in defense. We need to invest in research and development. And the Israeli military and defense industry managed during the course of the years since our independence to provide the Israeli Defense Army with solutions, technical, military, defense, that keeps Israel quality military edge, which is very important. It's important for a nation to invest in, defense establishment. And, last but not least, it's also the defense doctrine. For many years, because we were surrounded, by, as I said, unfriendly country, by regular armies, and, the proportion was a little tiny state of Israel, geographically, population-wise, was surrounded by quite a number of Arab countries, tens of millions of people, and still we manage. And we manage because our defense doctrine was at that time built on two major pillars. One of them is preemption, which means that when you recognize a threat, you are not waiting for the attack. You're taking the necessary measures in order to eliminate the threat. And the second one is the deterrence. The message that, even if you have two big sticks, that your response will hurt the attacker more than the attack. That's the essence of deterrence. I will stop here and wait for your question.
Mr. Ambassador Harri, a hybrid attack and terrorists in combination with neighboring Russia. Head of Kaitselit of Estonia, Meelis Kilis, said that in such a conditions, best answer, best response in case of any kind of attack would be responsibly armed citizens, not the army. Would you agree with this?
So I don't know what is the best, but if I may, I start a bit for our history. Somehow the Finnish army was constructed on the basis of the Russian Tsarist army. We were Grand Duchy of Russia quite a long time in the 19th century, before our independence. Also, we had the Civil War where a lot of Finnish officers were fighting on the white side. They were educated, they got their military education in Germany. So there were some two traditions in our Finnish system, and then our own national guard, voluntary guards, they were the third pillar. And when we faced our big neighbor in our winter war, I think that there were three elements, but two elements, German and Russian, they respected very strict discipline. But I think the Finns, on the voluntary basis, they learned a bit more, to be more innovative, more flexible, and they were more mobile. I think there were some three pillars in that. The Winter War story, mostly of you certainly know, the continuation war. But after that, I think that it has been also basis for the Finnish army and defense system afterwards, where a pillar, one very elementary pillar is that our army, conscript army, is democratic, socially inclusive. All guys come from different regions, from different social classes, and people are equal. And actually, by the way, if in our wars, Winter War and Continuation War, soldiers died, they were having funerals, all officers and soldiers, they were having similar kind of funerals. They were put to the same kind of graveyard. There were no that kind of social distinction. And that actually strengthened the whole from all levels of the whole army, and it was somehow the basis for the army after the war. Of course, in parallel with that, it has been very important that we have this voluntary forces, people who have knowledge about their own region, about they have the will, really strong will to defend their countries, and also they bring all kind of things. Of course, also in our army itself, it's the same, that they bring all elements wherever they work. And when we are speaking about a hybrid war or other kind of wars, information war, it's very important that the whole society can coordinate their work. And it concerns also the army. In this new technological situation what we are facing, what is more and more complicated. So we have to say that it's not only that you are physically fit, you have to know also what are the computers, what is required from there. So what is a hybrid war? You have to know a lot of things. So then if we have from all different social classes, from different sectors people, and they can coordinate together, I think that is a richness. So I think it's very important that there are people who are doing this on a voluntary basis. As an answer, this is very important. Our defense representative, Jouni Voutilainen, can continue because I think that time is limited and I'm ready to answer then also to questions.
So you borrow part of your time to your colleague. Nice view.
Okay. Thank you very much. I start with talking about our conscript system. And before that, I have to come back to this age issue when we were comparing Estonian and Lithuanian politicians. I have to say that I'm older than any Estonian acting general, but younger than any acting Finnish general. So there's the difference here as well. We have 900,000 trained reserves at the moment in Finland, which 230,000 has military tasks. And these little less than 700,000 who doesn't have a task during the wartime, they are still part of our society. And through these 900,000 trained reservists, we can get the will which we have in Finland at the moment, the highest in the world to defend our country, even with weapons, against any possible enemy attacking Finland. And I think this is the basic issue why I believe to Finnish Defence Forces. We have also 60,000 civilians. Some of them have gone through conscript service and some not. They have tasks in the civil industry, hospitals, police, firefighters, or something like that. And they are training regularly with soldiers, and they know their tasks, and they are the one milestone for our defense in the civilian side. We include the politicians for our training from the president down. Tabletop exercises, when we talk about the hybrid threat, we don't know what is coming. Different kind of alternatives, we test them, we practice them, we think what we should do, then we talk to the politicians and they make the decisions in these exercises. And then we continue the work that soldiers are doing after the political decisions. To make this conscript service useful, it has to be hard. It's not enough that we take youngsters, 20-year-old guy, year or 6 months to our training. If the training is not hard, tight, and focusing to the right issue, the message to the civilian side will be very negative, and the will go down. Therefore, we study and we do questionnaire to every year to the conscripts and make sure that we keep the training hard enough to keep the will up, because the will is anyway the basic thing to defend the country. This cannot be done without a good legislation, and at the moment, because of the hybrid threats, we are developing the legislation in the rules of engagement even for conscripts. At their later stage of their service, we might use them in some cases. For example, at the moment we have 1 battalion in Finnish border supporting police and border guard in this refugee case, what we are having between Finland and Sweden at the moment in north. Then one example about Finnish and Baltic countries, compare something. 2020, if and when Latvia and Lithuania reach the 2%, and Estonia stays in 2%, and economic growth stays as it is at the moment. These 3 countries have 2.3 billion euros per year as a defense budget. Today, Finland, we have 2.6 billion euros per year, and we have more than 200 tanks, 62 F-18s, 230,000 reserve in the Army, Air Force, and Navy. And then our Navy has surface-to-surface and surface-to-air capability and mine-laying capability. Our population is 5 million, Baltic countries roughly 6 million plus something. So if we think about the resources in 2020, they are almost identical with Finland and Baltic countries. And if we can make it 200 tanks and Air Force and the Navy, I think I see a bright future for the Baltic countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to address the next question to Mr. Paulauskas. Russia was mentioned many times today here, but I would like to jump to Belarus. And what relations with Belarus has to be or should be maintained? Glenn Howard stressed in the morning session that Belarus is strategic ally of Lithuania. Would you share your thoughts on this statement, please?
Ačiū. Galbūt norėčiau pradėti nuo to, kad Baltarusija mūsų duomenimis labai integruotai veikia su Rusijos ginkluotomis pajėgomis. Ir bendros pratybos, bendri įsigijimai, bendros karinės bazės, leidimas naudotis tomis bazėmis yra akivaizdus demonstravimas bendrų tikslų ir bendrų veiksmų. Aišku, galbūt mes norėtumėm, kad Baltarusija būtų neutrali, kad jinai kaip tai išeitų iš tos Rusijos įtakos. Aš asmeniškai labai sunkiai tą įsivaizduoju, žinant Lukašenkos įvairiausius viražus pagal politinę konjunktūrą, bet galų gale jie yra visi laiką priklausomi nuo Rusijos energijos resursų, nuo jų finansų, kurie pakankamai plačiai apėmė įvairias rytis Baltarusijoje. Todėl vadinti juos visiškai savarankiškais arba galinčiais elgtis neutraliai man labai sunku įsivaizduoti. Mes stebim jų karinį pasiruošimą ir galiu pasakyti, kad jis visiškai yra sinchronizuojamas su Rusijos gynybos reikalavimais ir pajėgomis. Ir šiandien mes matom grėsmę, galimą grėsmę iš tos pusės ir ją numatę atitinkamai ir planuojam savo atsakomosius žingsnius.
Colonel Larsen, I'd like to ask you, or just to forward you the previous question on possibility that active citizens should be the first ones who take liability to counteract in case of aggression. Would you evaluate, please, Lithuania's possibility to combine both forces, army and citizens and paramilitary units, organizations actually?
That is a very huge question when you ask a military person about that, because to synchronize three entities together is a challenge. Like an example, if you do three independent things together, then you can train it together if you train together. But right now, do the civilian train together with the Home Guard or your civilian defense forces or the military? If you don't train together, train as you fight, then it is a challenge. Right now, we have forgotten a lot of the old things. A lot of people believe that the wars will be like Afghanistan, Iraq, all that. All our young persons has a picture about what I call COIN, counterinsurgency, or things like that. I have been taught up in the old system, in the Article 5, where I was used to, how should I say, to train with, to fight against a strong opponent, a massive attack. That was what I was trained against. And there we used the Home Guard and our civilian forces in the right manner, and we trained together every year. We even had an exercise called Vintex-CIMEX, where our government and civilian decision makers, the municipalities, the Home Guard, and civilian defense agencies worked together every year. Every year we had reinforcements coming to our country. When we had the old Warsaw Pact, I was standing at the harbor in Esbjerg and guiding in a division it took 3 days. But we trained together, and we didn't just sit and talk, we did it. And that was real deterrence, because if you want to have a deterrence, you need to show and demonstrate that you have the ability to do it. And NATO has only defensive intention, and to train defensive actions are very complicated, because we have to be reactive, reflexive, and we have to make surprises. Where do we defend? Where do we, in fact, stop the attack? And where do we stop the aggression? And for that, you need to synchronize and coordinate. I'll just say one thing. What we should do, in fact, is we should improve our situation awareness from the comprehensive approach all together. The population, the agencies, and we should talk together, and we should inform together, so we have a common picture. And then we can counter the so-called hybrid warfare or new generation warfare together. Because I feel here, when I just been here 3 months now, since 1st of August, and the first thing I noticed as a military person was the will. Lithuanians has a very strong will to defend your country. And me as a military, if I had to go in and occupy the country, which is of course not thinkable at all, I'm here to defend your country. But if I had to, and think that way from the opponent, I would feel it as a big challenge that the will you have in your population is so strong. That's a big advantage. The other thing is the civil preparedness and the resilience that we have discussed before, the cyber defense, strategic communication, and then these joint training exercises. We just had a big exercise here with the ARC, the headquarters from UK, coming in here, and we have trained together them with forces, and we didn't bring in any forces at the moment, but we trained bringing in forces and started talking like old days. And this I believe in. So about the civilians coming in, if they're used for the proper task, where they're trained for, and we do it together with the right sets of mind, then we can do it. Thank you.
Mr. Kasniūnas, threat of ignorance of Western countries and United States on what's going on here in Baltic states, is a true threat for our region?
Labas visiems. Atsakymas iš tų, tai jais klausimus suprantu, tai taip, yra grėsmė, yra tikra. Ir ką aš norėjau jums perduoti, žinai, mano mintis yra apie šitą klausimą, kaip įveikti grėsmę. Tai čia yra iš mano pusės, iš išeivijos organizacinės pusės, kad savanoriai yra labai didelis jėga. Kai, tai noriu duoti pavyzdį, kai mes Amerikoje išgirdom, kad kas čia darėsi Lietuvoje 88-9 metais, 90-ais, nes mes jau turėjom tą savanorystės galvoseną kartu, mes galėjom labai greitai susiburti ir galėjom greitai perduoti informaciją Amerikos valdžiai, kongresmenams, senatoriams, Baltiesiems rūmams, kad žiūrėtų, kas čia darosi Baltijai, kad žiūrėtų, kas darėsi Lietuvoje. Tai mano patarimas, kiek sakau, iš išeivijos organizacinės pusės yra skatinkit tą savanorystę, skatinkit, kad vėl jie reikėtų, kad būtų, žinai, kad savanoriai galėtų sueiti kartu. Aš jūs labai, žinai, irgi gerbinu jūsų savanorystės darbo, bet taip pat laikykit ryšius su, ką jūs pažįstate išeivijoje, ką jūs pažįstate Amerikoje. Ir vėl, jei kada nors kas nors atsitiktų, jei ta grėsmė vėl būtų, kad galėtų labai greitai sueiti ir kad galėtų iš kitų šalių, ir aš kalbu iš mano krašto dabar iš Amerikos, kad mes galėtume labai greitai skambinti Baltiems rūmams, važiuoti ir perduoti tikslę žinią, nes mes žinom, kaip žiniasklaidoje gali būti ne visai pilnai tiesai.
Jaučiuosi pakankamai kvailai, nes dėl vertėjų turiu kalbėti kalbą, kurią šiaip turbūt nekalbėčiau su kai kuriais žmonėm. Dėl to vis tiek I'll turn to English. So now the floor goes to you. If you have any questions, please use the possibility to ask our guests. If not, I will. Okay, so I have many more questions. Mr. Kasniūnas said that we have to use every opportunity to keep relations, to inform our friends and colleagues in US, but all it goes on a voluntary basis. Shouldn't it be somehow supported by states? And this question goes to Mr. Paulauskas again.
Aš manau, kad mūsų ryšiai su išeivija pakankamai tamprus. Visai nesenai Seime, kaip tik tai lietuvių, pasaulio lietuvių bendrijos posėdis vyko, aptariami patys svarbiausi mūsų gyvenimo ir politikos klausimai. Iš tikrųjų, tai turbūt vienas svarbiausių šiandien klausimų, kurie niekaip negali būti įspręsti, tai dvigubos pilietybės klausimas, kurį kelia išeivija ir daugelis čia Lietuvoje politikų pritarė, bet nerandam teisinio sprendimo, vis ieškom galimybės atverti dvigubai pilietybei kelią, bet žinant šiandieninę mūsų saugumo aplinką, vėlgi mūsų tiems svarstymams yra tam tikri ribojimai ir tos formuluotės suradimas turbūt tapo vienu iš ilgiausiai ir skaudžiausiai įgyvendinamų projektų. Dėl išeivijos aš galvoju, kad vienu metu buvo nutraukta veikla mūsų tautinių mažumų departamento, kuris buvo atsakingas ir už darbą su išeivija, bendravimu. Ta vakumą bandė užpildyti Užsienio reikalų ministerija, iš dalies kultūros ministerija, bet kaip suprantu, grįžo prie to pačio modelio, vėl yra atnaujintas tautinių mažumų departamentas, kuriam viena iš užduočių kaip ir buvo, taip ir lieka bendravimas su išeivija. Bet kalbant iš savęs, aš galvoju, kad mes neišnaudojam visų galimybių. Labai tai gerai darėm 88, 90, tada, kai buvo Lietuvai labai svarbu, kada stojom į NATO, kada reikėjo mūsų palaikymo iš Amerikos, daugiausiai turbūt iš Jungtinės Amerikos valstijų. Dabar kiek tai yra prislopęs tas bendravimas ir gal nėra tokių labai aštrių tikslų, kurie reikalauja sutelkti visą išeiviją. Bet tas ryšys išlieka, kaip sakiau, laiks nuo laiko susirenka, kalba, aptaria ir manau, kad tiek išeivija, tiek mes esam pasiryžę kartu bendradarbiauti ir spręsti savo problemas.
Mr. Ambassador of Israel, I would like to hear your opinion. What do you think and what is your evaluation about Russia's possibility to feed citizens of Republic of Lithuania by all kinds of disinformation here via pro-Kremlins or via Kremlin orchestrated mass media? Is this a threat?
Well, I think that the information war is very important. The cyber war is very important, and a country should, prepare itself. If they're facing that there is a threat. We are using this word threat quite a lot, and if I'm not mistaken from my military and defense studies, there is a clear definition in at least the books to what is a threat. A threat is a combination of capabilities and intention. And then, if these two things exist, it means that there is a threat. So I think that first and foremost, I have no doubts about the capabilities. I'm not that sure about the intention, and this is something that the Lithuanian security and defense agencies need to evaluate if such intention exists. And if such intention exists, it means that there is such a threat.
Mr. Ambassador Harri, what do you think about the same problem, Russia's influence through media?
So I think that we have some experience in Finland about that after the World War, since that even. And during the Cold War, some of you might have been seeing this Estonian-Finnish movie, Disco and the Nuclear War, also how much Finnish television affected Soviet Union at that time. But of course, the original purpose was that they wanted to influence by the Estonian television towards Finland, but nobody watched it at that time. So all Estonians were watching Finnish television. So we don't even know how important it was concerning the collapse of the Soviet Union, because it was really a big issue, not only in Estonia, but also because the information flew to the wider area. But yes, what is very important in this is that the level of the education of each nation, that is the basic element to resist. If you cannot resist all kind of propaganda, you are very vulnerable also in that sense. So it is an overall question about the nation's educational level. And very much I would like to underline the reading skills still. When now we are having this time that children and young people, they are playing with computers and so on, but also it's important that we underline that they have to understand the read text. The text reading skills are very important. So all the nuances and meanings there. And if you are not able to do that, so you are more vulnerable to all kind of propaganda. Is it information war, what we are now seeing, or whatever? So I think it's a bit same in many fields.
Ar tikrai nėra klausimų auditorijoje? Galim wait for the microphone, please.
Čia buvo aiškiai išreikšta mintis, kad valstybės gebėjimas atsispirti potencialiai grėsmei yra susidedanti iš dviejų dalykų. Tai yra mūsų karinės galios ir žmogiškųjų išteklių, arba tiesiog, galima sakyti, žmogaus gebėjimą atrinkti informaciją. Kaip jūs žiūrėtumėt, ar tai būtų vienas iš sprendimo kelių Lietuvoje įvesti privalumumą karinės tarnybos, valstybės tarnybai ir pedagogams, nes faktiškai nuo jų priklauso visos visuomenės nusiteikimas ginti valstybę, saugoti ją ir pats pilietiškumo ugdymas. Ačiū.
Kam adresuojat klausimą? Any volunteers? Pone Paulauskai, jūs tada.
Tai dėl tarnybos ir galimybės užimti valstybės tarnybos laiptelį. Buvo įstatyme šitie dalykai numatyti, bet dabar grąžinus šauktinių tarnybą, aš mąsčiau apie tai, bet atsisakiau tik dėl vienos priežasties, kad dabar šauktiniai yra šaukiami loterijos tvarka. Jeigu tai būtų jaunuoliai baigę mokyklą šaukiami visi, tai tikrai tokia nuostata mano supratimu reikėtų, kad tik tai atlikęs karinę tarnybą, gal dėl kažkokių priežasčių, jeigu jis negali, gali patekti į valstybės tarnybą arba į tą pačią pedagogo profesiją. Dabar mes turim tą loterijos principą ir negali veikti tokie mechanizmai. Jeigu mes tikrai grįšim prie to ankstesnio varianto, aš linkęs, kad mes po truputį grįžtumėm prie jo, tai tada tikrai jūsų siūlymas būtų prasmingas.
Kostas Ivanauskas, Šaulių sąjunga. Norėčiau adresuoti klausimą Suomijos gynybos atašė. Norėčiau paklausti tokį dalyką apie kaip remiami Šaulių sąjungos atitiktis Suomijoje, kaip jie remiami, ar ginklais, ar seifais, ar ginkluotė ir kokią pagalbą suteikia valstybė. Ačiū.
So in Finland we have a voluntary training organization which is not training wartime troops, but it's training individual soldier skills mostly. And they are cooperating with Finnish Defence Forces in that way that when we have roughly 18,000 reserves per year for training, we order or request training from them. For example, we can tell them we want them to train guerrilla warfare for the groups in the woods in certain scenario. After this training, they will come to reserve training, and they already have the basic training before the reserve training. So we use them more and more all the time for preparing the former conscripts to the reserve training, and that is mostly the job for the volunteer training organization. They also arrange camps for kids, for women, to do same kind of issues that Brigadier Kiili mentioned today for the Kaitselit. And it's paid by government as well.
Pone Gulbinai, Vadė.
Lieutenant Colonel Guminas, retired. My question to the Colonel Larsen. So about the threats. So we are facing that threats are changing, and we are facing the threats. We have the green man, the cyber attacks, the refugees, and so else and so else. What do you think? How NATO should change in order to meet such kind of threats? Your comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. First of all, we are changing. I'm part of that. I'm the response to the threat, a part of that. The NATO force integration units was established to have a permanent presence here in Lithuania. And they are also established 7 other places at the moment. So alongside the eastern, should we call it the front of the eastern side of NATO, we have established NATO force integration units, and the primary, purpose is to receive reinforcements. Another important role we have is to keep the situation awareness. We are reporting to our higher headquarters through the NATO chain of command, and that's an independent. I'm not reliable on Lithuanian things. I'm an independent NATO command here. So when I report through the chain of command, it goes to headquarter MSC Northeast, which is located in Poland, but it's a framework nation headquarter under NATO command. They report further on to Brunssum and then further on to Shape. Why is that important? That is, a lot of information is coming in. There's a threat there, there's a threat there. As an example, we had the tragic incident in Paris, very tragic incident. We have other incidents happening around the world. My main focus is still East. I'm still located in Lithuania. My responsibility is to be able to receive units and reinforcements here full time. I coordinate with Lithuanian armed forces and the local authorities here in Lithuania on behalf of NATO. This is my 24/7 job. That means I do that every day, every evening, every night. I live here, I work here, so I will stay here for the next 4 years, and I will have an understanding of the environment. I'm not sitting in Brussels, I'm not sitting in Shape or another place, I'm sitting here. I have my family here, and I will also fulfill my task here, and that is real deterrence, that you have the ability and you have the will to do it. So yes, we have reacted NATO on it, and yes, we have been sleeping. We have been sleeping a long time because we have been focusing on other things. But I think the world we are living in now with this unpredictable, and I fully agree with my Israeli colleague about intent and capacity. When it's unpredictable, we should be ready to, answer every threat that is possible. And that's every threat. Not only focus on 1 or 2 or 3, but we should assess on every threat. And I believe that you also expect from me and from NATO that my team is doing the best to hinder and to be ready to fulfill our task. And this we are. Thank you. Ačiū.
Ačiū. Klausimų iš salės. Prašom, gale. Turim netgi 2. Už kolonos. Dėkui.
David Ajura, Lithuanian Riflemen's Union. My question would be to Mr. Israel Ambassador. I'm not sure if you will be able to answer it because you're a diplomat, but can you tell me what is the Israel approach to Russia? Do you see it as a partner, as a threat, just neutral, especially after this involvement in the Syria affair and so on?
Well, I can answer. Yeah. Well, Israel has, diplomatic relationship with Russia. We have, a very large Jewish community in Russia, and that's why, not only because of it, the relationship with Russia are very important for the state of Israel. Secondly, and maybe more important, in the past, nearly 50 years, Russia, whether we like it or not, is and probably will continue to be involved in Middle Eastern related issues. Let me just refresh your memory that during the 60s and the 70s, the Arab armies, were built on Russian platforms in the 1967 war, in the 1973 war, and even, your obedient servant in 1982 war, we, faced with, Russian tanks, the T-series, 54, 55, 62, 72, you name it, it was there. So it's clear that, they're going to be involved, and they can make our life in the region more difficult. And just recently, I'm sure that you're following the news, they're about to continue the supply of very sophisticated air missile systems to the Iranian, the S-300. So yes, they have, they are involved, and that's why it is very important for the State of Israel to maintain a very close relationship with Russia, to coordinate some of the activities. That was one of the reasons why recently our Prime Minister, as well as our Chief of the General Staff, visited Moscow, just to make sure that there will not be some misfortunate accidents in the airspace around our country.
Thank you. And we are talking about Russia, which is a partner of NATO within Euro-Atlantic Council, if I'm right. Ten buvo dar vienas klausimas.
Darius Grebliūnas, Mykolas Romeris University. I have a question for our guest from Israel. As most of us know, Israel has this model of conscription when graduates from high school go to military service for 3 years for men and 2 years for women. And as I wanted to ask if Lithuania should follow this model, because there was a huge controversy after our government did this job with the lottery conscription. What do you think? Thank you.
Well, first, I'm a supporter of Mykola Romerio basketball team. They have a very good basketball team. Several years ago, they won the European Championship. Yes, you're right. With some light, correction, as part of the efforts to, bring to a better equality. So recently, it was decided to increase the women's service by 4 months, so it's 2 years and 4 months, and to reduce the men's service by 4 months, so today it's 2 years and 8 months. So vive l'égalité. But yeah, lately I was talking about the military, the compulsory service in Israel, in the context of Lithuania. You can watch me on Monday in the LRT morning show. That will be the issue once again. And I believe that, once again, if Lithuania feels that they're under threat and they feel that they need to better defend themselves, so my recommendation is that you should go for it. You must go for it. And, when I'm talking about compulsory service, I'm not just talking about defense. It's not just about defense. Earlier, I was talking about giving back. It's how we, educate our children. Because in the future, and it was mentioned here about education and maybe some other needed social services, we need our, citizens to feel that, they need to give back. And in Israel, for example, just, I'm sorry for the digression, but it's not just the regular army, it's the reserve. The Israeli military power is not based on the regular army, but on the reserve. And the reserve, once you complete your military service, you start, your life working for most of the time in the year and spending time wearing uniform in the training area, in a post along the border as a reservist. And that's enabled us in time of emergency, in time of need, to use these reserves as part of our military campaign. But then it's not just about the reserve and the regular army. It's also about youngsters. It's also about people that, are exempt from military service. They are filling in for all these reservists that are now in the battlefield. So they are the ones to work in, in the industry. They are the ones to drive buses. They are the ones to make sure that the life in Israel will continue, despite the fact that many people are now in service. So I believe that it's about, giving back. But also for the youngsters, it's, it's about the self-development. In Kaunas Medical Science University, there are about 100 Israeli students. The dean just, talked to me last week and told me, how much we are happy about the Israeli students. They are more mature. They understand exactly why they are here. We don't have any discipline, problems with them. It's also about creativity. When you are faced with a situation, you have three options. Either to surrender, to say, I can't do it. Either to identify that it's a serious problem and then to simply bypass the problem, or, and this is the real challenge, to try and overcome the problem. And that's what I believe the military service is, training. It's also about values, friendship. What is friendship? You believe that you know each other. But only during, at least my military service, only during the time that, you're facing, a threat. But you are still, going ahead because you know that no matter what, your friends that are behind you, the friends that are beside you, will never leave you alone. This is things that, are very important, regardless the question whether a country is, under threat or not.
Thank you. Prašom, klausimas ten ir čia.
Labas vakaras. Laimas Dieninis, esu Lietuvos laisvės kovotojų sąjungos pirmininko pavaduotojas ir tuo pačiu šaulys. Buvau parlamento gynėjas, karys savanoris 1991 metais. Po to vyriausybės apsaugos karininkas ir praėjau realiai tą visą mėsmalę, kuri čia buvo Lietuvoje nuo 1989 metų. Žinau, kas yra grėsmė ir labai liūdna, kad po 25 metų jinai kartojasi. Matyt, tai bus kažkokie etapai visada. Ir norėčiau labai paprašyti suprasti, šį vakarą tikrai buvo diskusija, bet jinai buvo, mano manimu, ne iki galo išvystyta apie galimybę Lietuvoje vis tik tai sukurti efektyvę teritorinės gynybos sistemą, kur tikrai geriausias pavyzdys pasaulyje kaip mažos ir šalies yra Izraelio pavyzdys. Ir tikrai žavimės, kaip ten veikia ta sistema. Po to Suomijos šiaurės, to žiemos karo pavyzdys.
Ar galėčiau prašyti po truputį eiti link klausimą?
Trumpai tada aš noriu paklausti. Iš tikrųjų, gal patartumėt mūsų Lietuvos vis tik tai politikams ir NATO štabų vadai ir gerbiamas Izraelio atstovas ir gal net galima būtų padaryti iš tikrųjų kažkokias konferencijas Seime, nes mes tiesiogiai susidurėm, diskutuojam Seime šitais klausimais. Yra tam tikrų, ne visai pagristų baimių politikų galvose iš tikrųjų, kad šauliai ir kiti savanoriai, kurie turi licenzijas, pabrėžiu, ne šiaip, bet kam duoti ginklą, laikyti, sukurti teritorinės gynybos sistemą, tai yra, pagal gyvenamas vietas, pagal teritorinį principą, kad būtų išskaidytos ir ginklų saugyklos necentralizuotai, kaip dabar yra, kur priešas gali, sakykime, labai paprastai neutralizuoti, kad būtų parengtos tos grupės žmonių iš tikrųjų buvusiai kariškiai, policininkai, kurie turi leidimus privatiems saugos ginklams, tokių yra virš 70 000 gyventojų Lietuvoje, virš 100 000 ginklų privačių ir nieko neatsitinka. Kaip ir Izraelio pavyzdys demonstruoja, kad ir moterys su automatais vaikšto, pabaigsiu, kad aš saugumo aspektą noriu pabrėžti. Neatsitinka Izraelėje tikrai problemų, visi patriotiškai nusiteikę, teritorinio principų ginasi. Lietuvoje dabar politikų yra būtent Seime diskusija, teikiami Seimo įstatymo projektai, kad leisti šauliams efektyviai naudoti ir turėti tarnybinius kovinius šaunamosius automatinius ginklus tam tikrų kategorijų namuose arba artimuose teritorijose nuo gyvenamųjų vietų, kad būtų efektyviai įgyvendinta teritorinės gynybos sistema. Tai tiesiog labai reikėtų pagalbos mūsų politikams. Ačiū. Ar galėtumėt pritarti tokiai nuomonė, kad tai būtų efektyvu? Tai čia būtų gerbiamo Izraelio atstovai ir NATO štabo atstovai. Čia tiesiog, kadangi pagal jau kompetencijas. Ačiū.
Colonel Larsen and Ambassador, you should vote or what? I mean, you were asked for the support and advocacy for the Lithuanian citizens who are trained and responsible to have a right to keep rifles at home or near home in a safe place.
Can I make a remark on that? It's a very difficult, again, in Denmark we had our home guard, they have weapons at home. And then we had some challenges with the weapons to fix that, because the challenge was that they were stolen and used for a robbery. And when you use automatic weapons against the police, that's a challenge, because military weapons are, how to say, more tough than the others. It works now? Thank you. That's you. So, if I had to answer your question, I think it's a good idea that we have organizations that is looking voluntary on improving the defense, but it should be synchronized. And who should have weapons stored at home should be synchronized. We had in former time even munition at home, even anti-tank weapons at home with a home guard. But what was the purpose of that? The purpose was that they quickly could go to important vital infrastructure, protect transformators, protect bridges, or even blow up the bridges. All our bridges was prepared for blowing up. We knew exactly how to blow them up, even they were prepared for it. So they had a task, and me as a soldier, I knew every, area, and I knew who to contact. So there was a system. So if I have to vote for that, it is something like that I have to vote for. A transparent, synchronized, well-trained organization that has a task they are trained for and even also equipped for. Because it's one thing is weapons, but weapons is a lot of things. If we are talking with to fight against artillery, you should be protected. That is key lessons from Ukraine. That in the start they had big challenges, that the Russians used UAVs, and then 15 minutes later they had artillery and big losses. So if you need to have a rifleman, or you need to have voluntary forces, that is key, because you know the terrain. You should fight in the terrain you know. You should protect the bridges. You should protect vital infrastructure, so that the other soldiers can be used for other things. That's the whole idea in that. Protect water plants or whatever it could be. That could be the idea. So if you ask me to vote for that, I think it's a good idea. But again, it should be, we should train together, we should synchronize it, and it's not only Lithuanian forces, but NATO forces coming in also need to do it. Special forces coming in need to know who is running around, who is who, and who has weapons. So it is a big thing, and then we should have a common uniform, so they know exactly how they look like, and they are under command, and we have a C2 structure. Command and control. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last one question, because we are really running out of time.
Thank you very much. So, I'm Colonel retired Voutilainen, so My question is going to be not so challenging to the ambassador and to the both colonels. All the officers, when they finish their service, I mean the active service in the army, they retire. But for example, in Lithuania, you know, if a lieutenant colonel retires, he retires at 50 years old. It means until the dismission, there is 15 years gap. So the same, for example, with the colonel, 53 years, and then, you know, there's 12 years gap until 65. So my question is, you know, what is the policy in your countries about the utility of those retired officers? Are they invited into the exercises or not, and so on? So how do you use them in case of? Thank you.
Mr. Harri.
In Finland, we have a different kind of ways to do it. One alternative is that they will go work for this volunteer reserve training association. And they are usually their director, leaders, and retired NCOs are as instructors there. They are getting salary, but not very big salary, and it's paid by government. Another alternative is that they go to the civilian side, and in that case they will be asked to rehearsal training up to certain age depending on the rank. And for example, generals who are public figures, they are annually given briefings, what is the status and what is the development of the defense forces, that they can answer to the public if they are passed. Colonels and lieutenant colonels, they are in reserve until they are 60, and they participate training as well. Thank you.
Colonel Larsen, what about Danish experience?
In Denmark, you stay until you, as an example, I stay until I'm 62. So I'll be an old officer. What I've seen in Lithuania is that when you are a captain and you're not promotable, you'll go earlier. I think it's 43 or something like that. Please correct me if it's wrong. To make a captain, it takes between 10 and 15 years to make a good captain. And so when you put a young captain out in your system, and while you're also building up conscripts, you need, a bigger force of experienced officers. We use our officers, I'm 50, so I tried a lot of things. I have a lot of missions, I have a lot of experiences. So I have the picture, the mind mapping to do it. So what I think you should do is make a strategy for human resource, and to make as a captain, it takes 10 to 15 years to make a good captain, to make a good major at least 20, because you need experience. And experience you cannot read in a book. Experience you need to gain doing training or doing interactions with soldiers. That's how you do it. Thank you.
Pone Paulauskai, paskutinis klausimas jums. Ar matytumėte būtent šioje srityje galima resursą nacionaliniam saugumui stiprinti?
Dėl pratęsimo laiko mes jau padarėm dabar visai nesenai tokį sprendimą. Krašto apsaugos ministerija pasiūlė, mes prailginom terminus. Aišku, ne iki 62, dabar negaliu pasakyti tiksliai iki kiek, bet, kaip sakat, galbūt iki 55 kažkur tai. Bet aš irgi esu už tai, kad ilginti tuos terminus, ne tik tai kariškiam, bet ir statutiniams pareigūnams. Pas mus pakankamai jauno amžiaus išeina žmonės į atsargą, kai jie gali būti su tokia patirtim išnaudojama ir kaip valstybės resursas yra puikiausias. Tai aš už tai, kad ilginti, jo labiau bendra gyvenimo trukmė ilgėja, pensinis amžius ilginamas, taip kad ir kariai gali tarnauti ilgiau.
Už atsakymą. Thank you all for participation in this panel discussion. Ačiū visiems už klausimus ir dalyvavimą ir turiu paskelbti, kad konferencija baigėsi. Conference is over. Thank you all.